ran that track at 100 miles an hour. I think it was a Silver Spur.
And I was sure that that he got decapitated and then that his head fell on my lap.
I used to hill climb on motorcycles. Then I made my jump and it was wet and I hit into the mud and I went down and a guy hit me, went across my back. And I felt burning all the way to my feet. I said, "Oh my God, Charlie, you're paralyzed." And I sold it at a good, handsome profit. I built a bigger restaurant. And actually, I went broke. I went bankrupt. And guess what? He didn't have hurricane insurance.
Oh.
So he was another broke guy. And he was a little bit like me, but older. And he was motivated to get back in the business. And he and I developed the concept of Red Lobster. And we sold it to General Mills at that time. And I signed a 3-year management contract with them. I worked my 3 years and opened 72 restaurants for them before I left. God has always been in my life, and God has always directed me, and the timing has always been perfect.
A buddy of mine that I told that I was going to interview you this morning said, find out if the biscuits were his idea.
Jeff Stearns, connected through cars. If they're bigwigs, we'll have them on the show. And yes, we'll talk about cars and everything else. Here he is now, Jeff Stearns.
You know, it's mind-boggling to me how great you look, how great you sound. When we met, I was around 35 years old.
Oh.
And you were a super old guy that I figured, you know, how could he even drive? He's 70.
Super old guy.
A 70-year-old, my God, and look at now. So here's what's, interesting about you. I was reading a little bit about your history. You retired from, who bought Red Lobster? General Mills?
Yes.
Or General Foods?
General Mills.
General Mills. And then you worked for them, but then you retired
right.
Around 50 years ago.
After, I retired in 73. So how many years is that?
Oh my God. Well, let's see. I'm 55, born in 65, take off 8. So 47 years ago.
Well, I know a used car salesman could count real fast.
We could do the tax, the tag, the luxury tax.
Yeah, you got to do all that on your feet fast.
Well, now you know how I do it. It's like, well, let's see. Here's how old I am. Here's the year I was born. So it's just so interesting that somebody could use the word retirement, and then here they are 47 years later.
Yeah, well, I went back in business, of course.
Of course.
I'll show you. I wrote a book.
Yep.
I don't know if you can see them.
Red Lobster, the beginning. I see it.
Yeah, okay. And all my history's in that book.
Folks, I'm sitting here with the world famous, at least North American famous, Charley Woodsby. It's so funny. I mean, to be so legendary that some people don't believe you're real.
Oh, come on.
Well, true story is, first of all, the car that we met. So we met, of course, in the car business, and this podcast, this show is about interesting people I met through the car business. So even though you're not necessarily a car dealer or a car manufacturer, a personality, you're certainly a car person, because if you're not interested in cars, you wouldn't have been looking at the, I think, and you got to correct me if I'm wrong, 2000 Bentley Arnage sunset color. Is that the car we met over?
Yes. That was the first one, I think.
I also think that. I think it
Yeah.
was very low mile, maybe 1 year old, pre-owned or something like that.
Yeah.
Could it be?
I think you're right.
Okay. And then later, and there might have been another, maybe there was two of those. Could there have been?
There was.
Okay. And then later you got a very early, and this part I don't remember, either the Continental GT coupe or four-door.
It was the small, it's kind of a hatchback, and the back seat was large enough to seat two midgets.
I
was
don't
small.
believe. Okay, so this was after I left the retail Bentley business. So you must have done that one outside of me. I hope you felt guilty because I wasn't involved.
Well, I thought I bought it from you.
Well, maybe you did. Okay, so let me look in some notes here in my phone.
Maybe you sent me to North Carolina to pick it up. The dealer in North Carolina.
Well, I'm very good friends with Jeff Eade, the dealer in High Point.
That's where I went to pick the car up.
Okay.
And it
So,
was a gray, and then I bought another one after that, which was a silver spur.
If it was it Bentley?
It was a Bentley.
So that's Flying Spur, the four-door.
Line spurs. Okay. Yeah.
And what do you like about these cars? Why are you driving this instead of, forgive me, Buick?
Well, I don't know if I should say this on camera, but I'm not driving them now.
Okay. What are you driving now?
No, I'm driving a Mercedes.
Well, you know, Charlie, look, some people could say, oh, why does this person get all the good fortune or whatever? But in my, I think, 20 years-ish of knowing you, you know, it's funny, and I was reading before this meeting, I was reading your Talk of the Town website, and it said something to the effect of, you know, Charlie treats the staff or employees with respect, and that sounds a little bit like corporate mission statement PR stuff. But I can attest that even as your car salesman, you always made me feel like you were waiting on me.
Well, thank you.
That's sincere, and I was happy to talk to you. So here's the legendary part where people don't believe you exist. That's serious legend. So after maybe 2 times or 3 times, after a couple or a few of these car deals, you'd give me a business card, one of your business cards, and you'd write on there, steak dinner for 2 and initial it or something like that. And I had taken my first wife to the restaurant a couple of times when you'd give us these. And I never nailed you bad because I don't drink or anything. So just so you know. And, you know, I could have got you for another 20, 30 bucks, I'm sure. But I remember at the end of one of these meals, I hand the business card. And of course, I still want to tip the guy, you know, but I hand the business card to the waiter. And he looks at it, he goes, "What's this?" I said, "Well, Charley Woodsby's one of my customers. He gave us dinner." He goes, and we were at Charlie's Steakhouse. He says, "There's no Charlie." So this is when you're legendary. You know, maybe we should, I haven't named the podcast yet. Maybe we'll call it Legends or something. So I said, I wasn't upset. You know, I was entertained by it. I said, "Do me a favor, just go grab your manager or ask your manager." And the manager came back and looked at it, and he explained to the waiter, said, "Yeah, there's a Charlie," you know, and we talked about you a little bit. That was really funny.
I try to be right with my employees because they're the greatest asset that I have. And we treat them well and take care of them.
Well, I know that because any of them that really believed you existed always had the best things to say about you. And especially when we would be doing a deal, and I think I had to do it through I think I would do paperwork or something through Talk of the Town corporate office, and I can't remember the name of the person I would deal with there.
Dennis Darmont. He just retired. Been with us for over 30 years.
About you, are you eating out? Speaking of COVID?
Oh yeah, we eat out, but we watch the restaurants that we eat in, and we go back to the same ones that we're comfortable with. And if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, we don't go back.
Well, and you have a serious awareness of what a restaurateur
Right,
needs to do. You're very, very aware of the rules.
right.
So when you were driving Bentleys, even though you left Bentleys because of, let's say, notoriety or getting noticed, did you lean towards driving the car because people like looking at them and talking about them, or was it more the performance and comfort and luxury?
I like both. I enjoyed driving the car. I enjoyed the way it handled. In fact, the last Bentley, the sports car that I bought, and I bought that one in Clearwater because they had on Saturday a group of cars that they sell, and they got the track on 33rd Street in Lakeland and let everybody run the track. And I ran that track at 100 miles an hour. And I enjoyed the ride and the drive on that car. And it was just a great performing car. And I kept that car. I don't remember how long, but the reason I actually got rid of it was because it was so small. The back seat. I'm not kidding you. Two midgets could barely get in there. And,
I agree. It was really like almost a Porsche 911 backseat.
Yeah.
Right.
It was. Yeah. But I enjoyed the drive. I don't remember how many Bentleys I owned totally. I may go back and look it up. But, well, Rolls Royce, really. I bought my first Rolls in West Palm Beach. And I believe it was in 98 or 99.
It was it a Silver Seraph? Or a Silver Spur?
I think it was a Silver Spur.
So this would have been the end of the square body.
It was a magnolia color. I don't know if you remember that color or not.
Of course.
But it was a beautiful color.
Very, very popular.
Yeah. And everybody that would see it would turn their head. It was really a nice car. And I bought a lot of them. I say a lot of them. 3 or 4 used ones after that. And I enjoyed driving the Rolls Royce. But I felt like it was time to get rid of it whenever the people started following me home. And where we're moving with a new home, we have a guarded gate. So Mary Lou's been pushing me to get another car, but I don't know that I will.
Like we have now, will it be a gated community or will you have a gate in front of your property? Okay.
No, it's a gated community, 24-hour guards.
Well, I know a guy that can outfit it up with the machine gun turrets in the back and smoke screen, oil slick.
Yeah.
Now, when you went and driving 100 miles an hour at Lakeland Speedway.
Yeah.
That was Lakeland Speedway, right?
Yeah, right.
Can I tell you a little story about that track? So we had a very, very good customer, good friend, and it probably was related to the event that you had there, who was a partner in that speedway and a partner in the driving school. The name escapes me. We had a ride and drive day when the new Bentley Arnage T came out. So this would have been around 01. And we brought a hauler with, I think, maybe half a dozen cars, like we always did at various events. We'd park cars out front and hope somebody fell in love with something and
Right.
had to take it home. But we were inviting people to come drive their own cars on the track. So there would be people in their Bentleys or Mercedes or Jaguar or, whatever they brought. It was all good because it was fun car day. But we had all of our cars set up. Well, one of the cars that we brought was a late Ferrari 360 Spider. So it was probably around 2000 or something. And the fella that owned part of the speedway asked if he could take it for a ride. Now, he was already pretty known in Hooters Cup cars.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm not going to act like I know how to drive. I mean, I can drive, but I don't know how to drive. I don't race. And he says he wants to drive. So what's the harm? So he gets in the car. I'm riding passenger. We're going around like the road course thing where you got to make a turn before a wall and the cones. It wasn't like oval.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're the passenger, it's always scarier than when you're right.
Yeah.
So I'm in the passenger seat and I'm doing what I pretty much always do when I'm in the passenger seat. And I'm saying, I'd be braking right now. When we're coming up to a turn, I'd be braking right now. So we're going around faster and faster. And as we come to this wall where we've got to make a left turn, I'm terrified because I'm in the passenger seat and we should be braking and he's still accelerating. And finally, the third or fourth time around, he's getting more and more comfortable and learning the car. So he's going a little faster. We start understeering. We're heading to the wall. He turns the wheel. The car doesn't turn.
Ooh.
We're heading straight for this like cement barrier that you can move.
Yeah.
He gets the car to turn. Now we're heading straight for a chain link fence.
Ooh.
Which I'll take it over a cement wall.
You're right.
And I see the bar of the chain link fence heading straight for my eyes. So I duck down in the seat.
Yeah.
Like that. My eyes are closed. And I was sure that he got decapitated and then that his head fell on my lap.
Wow.
My eyes were closed. Something falls in my lap. Finally, he says something. So I'm pretty sure it's not his head. And I opened my eyes and our windows were open and the passenger mirror broke off and flopped down into my lap about that big.
Wow.
But it's funny, psychologically when you think something. So the first thing he says is, I'll buy the car. Don't kill me on the deal. It was mainly just scratched head to toe because it went through the chain link. And he kept it a while. And amazingly, he also owned part of a restoration shop or a body shop or something. He didn't do any paint repair, like paint work, like painting, but he did do polishing work on the car. And when he traded it back into me, it had a few like on the front edges of the Scuderia shield, the yellow shields on the fender of the Ferrari. It had a few like on the front trailing edge of those and a few on the front, but he had polished out 99%, 97% of the scratches on the car with just polish.
Yeah.
And then we took it back in on trade later and who knows what. But when you mention Lakeland Speedway, that's the story I always think of.
Right. Yeah, I enjoyed driving that. That was my first and last time.
Did it get hairy?
Well, that was an experience that I had and I enjoyed it. And if I went back, I'd probably be driving 110, 120 on that speedway, and I may not be here today. So, there's a lot of experiences. I used to hill climb on motorcycles,
Oh, no
And,
kidding.
yeah. And also raced them kind of locally, but I was racing in Christian, Florida, which is east of Orlando. And I was running, actually, I got off real fast and I made my jump, and it was wet and I hit into the mud and I went down, and a guy hit me, went across my back, and I felt burning all the way to my feet. I said, "Oh my God, Charlie, you're paralyzed." And they went by me because I was in front, and I was able to move my toes, my feet, and finally I was able to get up. I pushed my motorcycle off of the track, and I walked back to the trailer to trailer my bike, and I said, "Charlie, you like to play tennis, you like to play golf, you like scuba diving. There's a lot that you like to do. Why are you out here on that bike?" And I never got on a bike again for on a track or hill climbing.
When you went down, like before you came down in the mud, you jumped? I mean, you used to
Yeah,
get air?
I was jumping. Yeah, I was jumping because you run over, the obstacle was like a hill in front of the jump. And I jumped out into the front, probably maybe 20, 30 yards, and hit the mud, and I held on to it, and finally I laid it down. Well, I laid it down fine, and this guy ran over my back, and that's when I experienced that.
And you're laying there, and you're wiggling your toes, but you're almost afraid to try, right? Because
right,
what if it doesn't work?
Right.
Oh my God.
And so I got up. I said, "Charlie, no more. You like tennis, you like scuba diving, you like," I said, "Why?"
Now, what era was this?
It was in my 40s.
Okay.
So it's what, 50 years ago, roughly.
Well, I think you've always defied age. And, now that I just had a baby, and, of course, a lot of people, everyone that I know at least acts happy for me, but I get a lot of the jokes about it. Like, when will I experience empty nest? Go ask your mortuarian, But you really defy age. I mean, even what you're doing now, and then not a lot of guys are doing this hill climbing and motocross at 40.
Yeah.
Or in their 40s.
Yeah.
Now, if I recall, you have kids, right?
Yes.
And did you ever forbid them to have motorcycles or anything like that?
Well, my son had one, and he used to hill climb with me.
Okay.
Yeah. And he never did race, but he hill climb. And, if that accident hadn't happened, I probably would have got further and further and further and deeper into racing. Something serious could have happened. And, it's just time for me to quit. I experienced it, and that was it.
I tell my kids they're not allowed to have a motorcycle on the street, at least in Pinellas County, Florida.
I never rode one on the street. Never.
It's crazy.
He still does. He has a group of, they're actually professional doctors and lawyers, and they'll send their motorcycles by van to Colorado or wherever they're going, and fly out there and ride them for maybe a week, 10 days, whatever they want to do. And they'll get back on the plane, come home and truck the motorcycles back.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful thing to do, to take the bike to a destination.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing, even with vintage rallies or whatever. I mean, you haul your car to the location. I mean, when I was riding bikes with my late father in Clearwater, Florida, and, you know, for the listener that doesn't know Clearwater, Florida, heavy density, tons of retirees. I can't tell you, even with the loud pipes, how many times someone changed lanes into me, and I'm riding on the median strip through bushes on a Softail Harley Davidson.
Well, you know, in a car, it's quite difficult to see a motorcycle. There's too many dead spots in the mirror to see a small motorcycle. And unless you hear them and see them up close, you don't know they're there. And you'll pull over in front of them.
I've upset a few of them and felt terrible about it that I didn't see, because I can empathize.
Yeah.
So do you mind if we go back in time a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I don't want to spoil the whole book, and I want people to have a good reason to buy the book so you can get the better building materials on your Lakeland house.
Well, it's almost finished. So.
Okay. The full tank in the Mercedes. Get Mary Lou the Bentley. Early on, I mean, take us back. Like, what got you into the restaurant business? Where were you geographically? Carolinas?
Yeah, after I got out of the Air Force, I went back to the Carolinas, Spartanburg, and my brother had a restaurant in New York City, a diner, and he was on vacation, and he and his wife, and he asked me to come out and work for him. And the money was good in South Carolina. Back in those days, restaurant business wasn't very good. And so basically I went up there and worked for him. And I had a chance also to go to school with RCA in New York to become a field representative. So I worked for my brother and I liked it. And I went to culinary school. So that's where I got my training.
Got it. So how does it go from that to opening this first restaurant?
Well, I always wanted to be in business for myself. And it's a real progression. Gene and I lived in New York. We had our first child there, Ronnie, boy. And we didn't want to raise him in New York City. So where did we go? Food business, you don't go back to Spartanburg. So we decided Atlanta would be the place for us to go.
Okay.
And we went to Atlanta and bought a little tea room that was open for dinner only. And as Peachtree was, businesses were moving out Peachtree, they were buying these big old estate homes and tearing them down and building high-rise businesses. So I started opening for breakfast, and then I started opening for lunch. And I built a big business, and this little tea room only seated about, I think about 50. And I said, if I can do that here, I'll just build a bigger restaurant, sell this and build a bigger restaurant. And I sold it at a good, handsome profit. I built a bigger restaurant, and actually I went broke. I went bankrupt. But I had 3 kids at that time and a wife, Jean, and I had to feed them. So I got a job with Miss Georgia Dairy. And back then they were doing house delivery, on milk. You may not remember that at your age.
I had a milkman in Detroit when I was a kid. Yep.
So I was delivering milk. They gave me a route that was very, very low with a very low salary. But every new account that you added, you got a bonus. And so I was up at 3:00 in the morning. I would set my milk off and I would have it set off by 8:00. I would go have some breakfast and then I would start knocking on doors. And I built the account up so fast, or the route up so fast, they wanted to make me a supervisor. And I came home and told my wife, Jean, and Jean said, Charley, she says, you know, your heart's not in the milk business. Said, your heart is in the restaurant business. And said, I think you ought to go back into the restaurant business. And so I thought about it, and she was absolutely right. And I probably rose up with the company because I was just that type person. What I did, I got a job with Davis Brothers Cafeteria, operating a cafeteria for them.
What city is this now?
This is in Atlanta.
Okay.
Atlanta, Georgia. I immediately rose up to supervise another one, to 2, and then I went to 3. And we had a restaurant convention in Atlanta, and Bill Darden from Waycross, Georgia, was the president of the Restaurant Association, Georgia. And I met him there, and he and his brother had opened the Thunderbird in Jacksonville and was losing money profusely. And they needed a manager, and he talked to me about a manager. And I told him, I said, Bill, I'm not really interested in a manager's job. I got one, and I got a good one. And I said, I'm interested in going into my own business or partnership. And he said, well, his brother's name was DC. He said, DC and I are not looking for a partner. He said, we want a manager. I said, okay, fine. So a month later, I went back to Atlanta, and a month later, he called me up and he said, Charley, would you come down to Jacksonville? I said, Bill, I said, if you'll send me an airline ticket, I'll come down on the weekend and we'll talk. And so he sent me an airline ticket, met me at the airport, picked me up, and I spent the weekend with him, and I finally negotiated a deal with him where he would pay me $500 a month salary, and the first 10% profit that I made went toward me buying into the business at book value, not at the value after I built the business up and made it worth a lot of money.
Right, because you could work against yourself.
Right.
Right. And what year is this, Charley?
1960. It was livable. Good managers were making probably 6. And but I was willing to take a chance and willing to, make the move. And I moved my family down there and managed Thunderbird. First thing I did, I cleaned the place up, hired a professional chef from Chicago, and put the girls in a nice uniform, and actually taught them, the how to be a waitress and how to treat guests and things like that.
Right.
And built the business up. And he and I actually were partners in 5 restaurants when we opened the first Red Lobster.
So he didn't resent the fact that he had to bring you in as a partner. He didn't,
No, not after losing all that money.
Right. You put him in. So how do you go from, this was Jacksonville, so how do you end up in Lakeland? Who knew what Lakeland was back then?
We bought a restaurant in Orlando called Gary's Duck Inn, and I was supervising 5 of the restaurants at that time, and we hired a manager from Clearwater to run the restaurant. He had a restaurant on the beach. His name was Wally Buckley. Hurricane came through and took his restaurant down. And guess what? He didn't have hurricane insurance.
Oh.
So he was another broke guy. And he was a little bit like me, but older. And he was motivated to get back in the business. And he and I developed the concept of Red Lobster at Gary's Duck Inn. And we opened the first one in Lakeland, Florida in 1968.
How did you choose that location, Charlie?
Well, at that time, Polk County was approximately 250,000, the whole county. And we wanted to be away from the water. We didn't want to be on the water because we knew a restaurant on the water would be very successful like that. So we wanted it inland to test it and see how it would do. And
why did you think waterfront was negative?
Because a seafood restaurant on the water will always be successful.
Oh, you wanted to see if the concept could work off the water.
Right.
Got it. I thought you were saying that it wouldn't work on the water. My mistake. Okay.
No.
I get it.
No. And so we tried it. Like we looked around in Florida to begin with, and we discovered Polk County and the population in Polk County, and we did some demographics, and that's where we decided to open the first one. And at that time, Lawton Childs, I don't know if you remember Walken Lawton, he became the senator from Lakeland, the state senator, actually national senator, and he actually was an attorney. He and Bill Ellsworth, which was his law partner, had a piece of property in Lakeland on Lake Parker. And we leased that property from them and built on that property. And from day one, it was a success. Lines around the building.
No kidding.
Yeah. And we knew we had a winning concept. And so that's when we opened another one in, we opened in St. Pete. We opened one on Tampa Causeway. That was the second one. Third one was in St. Pete. And then we went to Orlando and then to Ormond Beach. It wasn't on the beach, but that was the name of the community.
And iDrive on Orlando, iDrive was nothing like now.
Oh, yeah, it was nothing at all. It was still dirt and woods.
Right.
And we just had General Mills. We had 2 or 3 people that were trying to buy us. And we finally hooked up with General Mills. And we sold it to General Mills at that time. And I signed a 3-year management contract with them. I worked my 3 years and opened 72 restaurants for them before I left, which is unheard of, not almost, is unheard of. Nobody had ever done that. And
There'd been no restaurant chain that opened locations at that rate prior?
Right. Full service chain. McDonald's or drive-throughs or, that type of thing. Fast food, yes, maybe.
Right.
But no full-scale restaurant.
And you had no experience in that. So it wasn't like, hey, I'm the guy that knows how to open 72 locations. So how was it for you in the middle of all that?
I think that God has always been in my life, and God has always directed me, and the timing has always been perfect. The timing for Red Lobster was perfect then. Nobody had ever opened a seafood restaurant chain like that, and especially inland. And we were very fortunate at that time. The Cape had a downfall, and they were laying off engineers, and we started hiring engineers from the Cape, and we started the Red Lobster School, a school for the managers that we hired. And they were very successful people because they were educated and they followed directions, and a lot of them were ex-military, and they made great managers, and it was just right time to do something like that. And basically that's what happened.
Well, you did that for 3 years. You filled your contract. Now, I know your personality. I mean, I know you personally, and you do like activity and you do like accomplishing. So there had to be some adrenaline in that. There had to be some life satisfaction and accomplishment in that. What made you say, okay, I'm done with my 3 years, goodbye? Or did they not want you anymore?
Well, they asked me to stay, but, I actually felt like I'd burned myself out.
Oh, okay.
I really had. And I was away from home a lot, and I wanted to spend more time at home.
Okay.
I bought a 41-foot Hatters and kept it down at Stewart. And believe it or not, I couldn't find anybody to go fishing with me because they were all my friends at that age was working.
Right.
And,
you had no one to play with in your early 40s, retired.
Right. And same way with golf. I would go to the golf course to play golf, and as senior citizens and to play with. And tennis, I had no one to play with but ladies and kids. And I finally said, Charley, what are you doing? I was, I really wasn't happy. And I was shooting pool with a friend of mine in Lakeland, Andy Williams. And I said, Andy, I'm bored to death. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. But I said, I'm really bored to death. I said, I'm going to try to go back into the restaurant business. I had signed a no-compete contract with General Mills for 5 years. And finally, I got permission from them to go back into the restaurant business, but not seafood, steak. And so then he said, well, I know an old Howard Johnson downtown Lakeland that said, you can steal that place. I said, well, I don't want to know Howard Johnson's. He said, well, you ought to go in there and take a look. And it was an old one. And I went in there and took a look at it and sat down with a pad, and I had to have 4,000 square feet. and it was only about 25. It was one of the older ones, 2,500 square feet. And I sat down and drew on paper enough space to get 4,000 square feet in there to get liquor license. And so finally I bought it from the guy. And first thing I did was take the roof off and put a mansard roof on it and completely renovate the building. And I put antiques in it. And back in those days, antiques and stained glass and things like that was in. And I put those in. And my son had just gotten out of the Marine Corps, and I asked him where he wanted to go to college. And he said, Dad, he says, I don't want to go to college. I said, what do you mean? He says, I want to be in the restaurant business. And he says, you can teach me more than I can learn in college. And he said, I would like to work for you. So I actually took him in as a partner in that restaurant. And,
well, Charlie, dealing in exotic cars, obviously I've dealt with a few people that did financially okay in their life. And I can't tell you how many stories there are about no college, about entrepreneurs. I mean, obviously, if I'm dealing with a doctor or an attorney, they have to go to college. But many of the entrepreneurs probably couldn't even have made it. I mean, they terrible study habits, terrible attention spans, which made them terrific at what they were interested in.
Well, my son, believe it or not, you can ask Mary Lou, he's one of the brightest businessmen. I won't say today, but he's a bright businessman.
Okay.
Very successful.
So you brought him in as a partner immediately.
Well, I didn't really need a partner.
Right.
But I took him in because I felt like if he had that attitude, he knew what he wanted to do. And a lot of people at his age getting out of the Marine Corps, they don't know what they want to do.
That's right.
And so Jeff, I've always had the knack to analyze people and read them pretty good. And I think God gave me that. I think God gave that to me.
Back to Red Lobster for a minute. The rolls or the biscuits, whatever those are.
Biscuits came after me, after I left. When we opened, we served hush puppies.
I actually remember those days.
Yeah. But
a buddy of mine that I told that I was going to interview you this morning said, find out if the biscuits were his idea.
No, that was after me.
Okay.
They changed things around. My original concept was that basically a sit-down fast food, fast service. And we didn't serve any desserts at that time. They changed it. We didn't take any credit cards. It was cash or check. And that way we keep our prices down. And we had a motto at that time that a family of four could eat for $10.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was true. And our prices were very low, a heck of a deal. A lot of people, when they went to the Lakeland store in the beginning, they were interviewed in line, and several of them said, we want to eat one more time with these people before they go broke. And they didn't know.
Think you could do it. They didn't think you could sustain it.
Right. And we had a sign out front. It was a $5,000 sign. And we had it put up right before we opened. And we were going to go to the bank and finance it. We paid cash for it out of the first month's profit. And that was back in the 60s.
So if your prices were so reasonable that the customer, the diner, is thinking, I better eat here again before these people are gone, that means the market would have probably bared dinner for 4 for 11 or 12 or 14. What made you come in below market? What was the model? Just volume?
Volume.
Okay.
That's what we went on. There again, it was timing. Like king crab, we would get big king crab, as big around as my thumb, or bigger.
Right.
My thumb up here. And we were paying 97 cents a pound for it out of the packaged in a package.
Mm-hmm.
And we were paying 30, 31, 32, 33 cents for filet of flounder.
Okay.
And prices were cheap on lobster, but this is the Europe and Japan had not come out of their, World War II at that time.
They hadn't fully recovered.
No, they had not. And they were not buying lobster, shrimp, and king crab and, the upper end product. And we were able to buy it at that price. And we made a profit on it at that price. And we felt like hey, that was the way to do it. And it was a concept that we felt like that we could open nationwide. And it was. And finally, Red Lobster, and I think they basically probably had to. They started taking credit cards. We had a brick red floor. They started putting carpet on the floor. They started upgrading and raising their prices.
Right.
And because the food actually, the material that they were selling cost more to purchase. And at that time, and so they had to raise and get a better margin. And they started out serving key lime pie, and then more desserts, and they changed the concept really.
I'm not in the restaurant business, and I'm sure many of our listeners are not restaurant owners, managers. What makes you say no dessert? I'm just curious when you said that.
Like I said, Wally Buckley and I developed the concept at Gary's Duck Inn. And it was a seafood restaurant. And we noticed that a lot of people would buy a piece of pie or cake with 4 people at the table, and they would sit there and everybody would take a taste, and they would keep the table tied up for another 20 minutes or so drinking coffee. And we did not want them sitting at that table. We turned the table at that time, believe it or not, in approximately 20, 25 minutes. That was a table turn, which is almost impossible. You couldn't do that today, I don't think, because of the variety of menu and things like that.
Okay.
But
I understand now. So the things
Yeah.
that you're measuring when you're, for example, I asked you about your pricing model, you're of course measuring the cost of food. You have to put in your other overhead factors into that. You're doing volume, but I wasn't thinking about the velocity of turn on the table, how many times
Yeah.
you can seat that table in one night.
That's right. That's what we did. And what we did, we got to the point to where we would, when we got to rush at 5 o'clock, we would only seat a party every 3 minutes so we wouldn't bog the kitchen down and they could get it out and turn over. And it was like a factory, really.
So, but another thing that you invited me to, and I was very, very honored, is I think you called and you said, I'm getting this Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes.
Was that in Orlando?
Yes, it was at Universal Studio.
Just the fact, I mean, I was really honored that you thought of calling and inviting me. And,
Yeah.
but what was funny at that, I mean, first of all, it was very touching. I mean, you had to be moved when they were going over what you accomplished. It was almost not to be believed, as they ran down. I mean, you really are a go-getter, and I'm a salesman. So, of course, the most interesting thing to me, we can definitely have another one of these after I read your book, but the most interesting part so far, Charlie, is you going door to door selling the dairy, selling the milk delivery.
Yeah.
I'm so intrigued in the salesman aspect of that and how you did that, but it also shows that you were willing to do what others weren't willing to do.
But I think a lot depends upon how you were raised, too. A lot of people, I feel sorry for them. They're not really taught, the right principles. And I feel sorry for them when they are not.
Well, you're a worthwhile guy to listen to, from an advice standpoint, because it didn't fall on you and you'd even been bankrupt once. Yeah. You could have packed it in. You could have stayed in a safe salary situation, whatever.
Yeah.
You're self-made, but I love that you mentioned the upbringing of parents. I mean, just like you give credit to God, you give credit to parents, you give credit to your staff. I mean, your point of view is really amazing, and I can tell that it's not like a well-practiced PR department point of view. I mean, this is you because I know you, and this is how it always was when I was with you, and that's why it was always enjoyable for me. Every time I got a chance to be with you, it reminded me of a great friend or uncle going to come to town, because you were coming from, I think, Orlando.
Yeah.
When you would visit me at the dealership, and I was always very happy. I hope that we got a deal, but I was always happy that you were coming. You were an uplifting guy. You were someone that I could learn from, and that's sincere.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and it's true. Oh, so at your Lifetime Achievement Award, I don't know if you know this or remember this. So out in the audience, talking to some fellow about what I do or who I am or however it came up, and the guy next to me says, are you Jeff Stearns that sold cars to Dejan Vojovic, and he owns a National Restaurant Brokers? And I said, yeah, I sold him a gray Turbo R, a dark gray Turbo R, I believe, Bentley Turbo R. He says, well, I've heard about you. He's mentioned you. I'm his brother, and he was at the time, COO, I believe, of Beef O'Brady's, and now the founder of the Little Greek.
Oh, okay.
So that's what was happening for me out in the audience. Yeah. Well, you've already, Charlie, given some tips for success. Like, it's not going to fall on you. If I asked you directly, any other tips for success for a younger person, or, well, heck, you weren't even that young when you started over again, or, someone in the middle of their life needing to keep going. Any advice?
First of all, discover or find out what you really like to do, and then apply yourself and learn everything you can about that business, and don't give up when you hit an obstacle. And if you do that, you will be successful.
Choose your direction and then don't give up. How about a restaurant tip?
I've always had the motto, Jeff, I've never fired anybody my whole life. They always fired themselves by their actions. And I don't have to go up and chew them out or talk mean or nasty to them. I really don't. They actually, by their actions, fire themselves.
You tell them your expectation. Tell them what the measurables are. I'm sure if things don't go right, you give them some counseling.
Right.
And then you can look yourself in the mirror, because it's usually either a matter of they don't know or they don't care.
That's true.
So as long as you can look yourself in the mirror that they know.
You got to train them right. And my motto is train, retrain, retrain, retrain. And you got to train them right and keep them trained, because they forget sometimes. And you keep them retrained. And, it's like a waitress. They actually are in business for themselves too.
That's right. It's entrepreneurial. It's tips. Sure.
Absolutely. And I give them their own little business here to run. And if they run it bad, they're not going to make the money. And if they run it good, they're going to make money. And that's my philosophy on my employees in the front of the house.
They can have a direct impact. It's not a fixed income. Their attitude, their recommendations, their knowing to interact or knowing when the guest wants to be quiet. They're just right.
Absolutely.
Got to be able to read that. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I love that train, retrain, retrain, retrain.
Yeah.
That comes from one of the most successful, record-breaking restaurateurs and business people in the United States. I really appreciate the time. Yeah, it went by quick for me.
It went by quick for me.
After this, I'll send Mary Lou my address. If you don't mind, I will take a book and read it.
Okay, I want you to.
And if it's good, I promise I won't give you 1 star on Amazon.
Oh, okay.
This has been Jeff Stearns, Connected Through Cars.